So we've been on the road since 10:30 this morning. This is life for a disabled veteran in Mojave County. I have appointments at the Prescott VA 3 days a week. So I leave no later than 11 o'clock from Kingman, drive 3 hours for my hour-and-a-half appointment, then another 3 hours back. When I have these meetings, I am literally flying out here to get here. But this is, I share my day because I look, again, like a scruff muffin from Mojave County. But this is what life is like out here regarding medical access in this remote, rural area. Now, as a veteran, I have my VA, but I have the luxury and the blessing of, I go to Las Vegas, my care is in Loma Linda, and Prescott. So those are the 3 different VAs that I access for the specific medical treatment for me. I have that choice. Most of the people out here in Mojave County do not have that choice. I am a we together person living in a me first world. Just because I, as a veteran, have that wonderful benefit does not mean that I'm not going to fight for everyone else to have the same access to health care. Now, most of you know already that I am a first-time candidate. I'm not a politician. I do not ever want to be a politician. And I don't say that to be funny. That is not what is getting me. I'm not a career politician looking for, upward mobility. I am a political activist. And I have been a political activist my entire life. I was thinking today about my very first solidarity protest was when I was in 4th grade. I think we had corporal punishment back then, and my best friend had been smacked with a ruler across her hand, and it was just a terrible injustice to both of us. So at lunchtime, we left campus, and we went to her house. Well, in 4th grade, I didn't consider that they were going to call my mom, so I come walking home at the right time. And of course, there's Mom saying, "Where were you?" She sent me to my room and punished me with a 250-page essay about what I had done, which led to the second protest. Because I did not apologize, I did not, it was about justifying why what I did was the right thing to do. Even in 4th grade, I knew that that was not okay. And that when things are not okay, you do something. Even if it's leaving school and, going to your friend's house in protest of something that is wrong. That same passion for protest is also what underlies all of my issues for why I'm running. I am a first-time property owner here in Mojave County. I was telling Mary last night I'm having a tiny house built on my property. It's 11:30, I can't sleep. I've never owned property ever. I am building this tiny house. It is my dream house. It is my passion house. I'm walking through in the moonlight because I don't quite have a roof in there yet. I'm looking out the windows. I don't know how long I'm going to have water in this dream house that I have, because the water sustainability plan here in Mojave County is unsustainable. We need to revision the water rights laws so that they make it fair and equitable for everybody. Because what's happening now, we went to a city council meeting fairly recently, a work session, and the U.S. Geological Service came out, and they're in an interim, they sort of gave a halfway, they're doing an impact study on the water to come up with solutions for Mojave County. We are using water faster than our aquifers are recharging. Okay, so we are using water faster than our aquifers are recharging. Now, up in Washington, they don't care about stuff like that with the deficit. They just print more money. It doesn't work that way with water. Water is life. Without water, we have no property values. We have no ability for anything here. So education, all of those things, healthcare, are meaningless if we cannot sustain life in our basic everyday living. So that is my number one priority. The commercial agriculture is not going to be happy about the changes that need to be made. They can't continue to drop wells because that's what the water rights laws say they can do. Because it's not okay for them to do that with no accountability for the residents who are also using that aquifer. That's my water. That's, my bathing for my dog. That is life for me and for everyone else here. So that is my biggest issue. The second issue I've already spoke to, that is the health care. As a woman, again, we together, a human rights advocate for my entire life, I will not stop fighting until this state ratifies the Equal Rights Amendment. So those are the three big reasons why I'm running. That advocate, the protester from 4th grade, she is still standing up, speaking up, holding people accountable, because that is who I am at the core of my being. That doesn't change just because, I'm running for office. In fact, I'm running for office because that passion is there for me. Now, Mary and I, we're running in a district that's considered a one-party dominant district. Mm-hmm. I've made this graph because I want to show this to you. This is a graph taken from Clean Elections data, March 2018. These are the number of registered Republican, which you see the red line, and the number of registered Democrats here in LD5. Now, LD5, for those who don't know, is most of Mojave County and all of La Paz County. That's my district that I will be knocking on Kelly Fryer's door saying, remember when you came to Mojave County? Yeah, we're here to hold you accountable for what you said you were going to do here. So that's the district that I'm representing. This is the reason why Democrats feel like, what's the point? Why bother? We can't win, right? 22,000 versus 57,000. We can't win. But here at LD5, we have a huge population of independent voters. And this is what it looks like when you factor in those independent voters. Now, this is a perfect world. It's not going to go this way. We know that. A lot of those independent voters are going to swing to the Republican side. But this is the pure potential. This is what we fight for. This is what we get up and go out into the heat and crawl around like scruff muffins in the Kingman wind, chasing people down in the parking lot just to get them to sign my petition so I get on the ballot. So this is who I am. This is what I bring to the table. There is so much more to who I am than what I can give in this very short presentation. But I bring these stories to you from when I was young, because that is before, it's just innate. It's instinctive. It is the natural course that our spirit is growing and evolving. And it speaks to who we will become as an adult. So I share these stories so that you can see who I have been for my whole life, because I've only been living here in Kingman for 4 years, and most of you don't know much more about me than these stories that I bring to you. So if you have not already signed my petition, please do so. The SOS Equal site online, if you have friends that you think can help by signing, please get one person to sign, and we need 5. But the last thing I want to say is, again, I am a we together person, fighting for that we in a me first world. And there are wonderful people here today that Mary and I are going to be together working on this we journey that we're all a part of. So, any questions you have, we'll be here for the rest of the evening. But thank you very much for this opportunity to share another layer of my personal story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim.
They need to say their name for the camera.
I'm sorry?
They need to say their name for the camera.
I said her name, didn't I? What I did neglect to do was to introduce myself, and all of you know me, I think, actually. I'm Joan McDermott. I'm the District 3 Chairman for the Mojave County Central Committee, Democratic Central Committee. Also, some of our officers are here today. Kelly is back there, and you've all met him. Kelly Lindsay, he's our president. And Donna, but you all met Donna, Lindsay, and Andrea Nickel in the second row over here is another of our, and one of our officers is a snowbird, and she's gone. They are all the officers for our Democratic Club here, the Democratic Association of Havasu. Next, I'll introduce Mary McCord Robinson. And Mary is a Democrat, and she's running for LD5 legislative position. She has extensive experience in business, planning, and management. Like Jim, she's been very active in the Kingman Progressive Alliance. She brings an immense amount of energy and passion to her campaign, and she's deeply caring about our little corner of Arizona. And her goal is to work hard to meet the unique needs of our people in rural Arizona. Mary, you have the floor.
So, Mary McCord Robinson. I have 30 plus years working in the corporate world. I did business information technology for one of the world's largest consulting companies. I started as a receptionist right out of high school, and when I retired 37 years later, I was at the highest level you could achieve in the company, and I was managing director. So I know how to work hard, I know how to learn, I learn quickly. I've done big company transformations, transitions, modernized companies, technology platforms throughout their business. So I have a lot of organizational design, human performance experience, and I want to bring that to the rural communities. We need to bring ourselves up and recognize that we have a lot of talent in the rural communities that's not being tapped. One of my greatest achievements, I have two in my life. One is the work that I did after Hurricane Katrina. And that was we organized with the state of Texas to Louisiana, and we were the first company to be able to issue food stamps on behalf of another state. That was so emotionally charging for me. The second was I worked with a Native American Indian reservation in rural Oregon to start an information technology company. Software developers, software testers, software engineers, business processing and administrative support. It's 100% owned by the tribe, and we were able to make an impact on the rural communities. We hired 300 people locally. All we asked for was a high school education and a good attitude and aptitude. There are 300 people working there today, 10 years later. It made a huge difference. One of the things we also did, though, was partner with the governor of Oregon. And that is, as new companies were coming into Oregon, and everybody wants to be in Hillsboro or Portland, right, in the suburban area where lots of things to do. She said, fine, but instead of giving you tax incentive breaks, what you're going to do for me is you're going to give me jobs in my rural communities. And I think we can duplicate that same effort in our district. We have a lot of smart people. We have the transportation, right? We can do this. We have to improve our infrastructure. We need broadband to be able to do some of this, but we have really smart people. And there is no reason why a company like Intel is not having all of their administrative support or their repetitive projects, their software testing and development being done in rural communities. It lowers the cost. It's their cost of service comes down, right? It's more profitable for them to do that. And we have to give back to our community. So I'm looking to think out of the box, bring innovative solutions, right? Human rights, civil rights is also very important to me. The father of my children is a Lebanese Muslim. So I was a part of that for a long time. My husband today is African American, and we can't go anywhere that people don't look at us and say, party of one? No, it would be party of two. And when my children were small, and oh, by the way, they're vegetarians on top of it, right? So it just added another layer of complexity.
We have salad.
You know, it was, right, again, it was party of three, never, oh, party of four. I mean, you learn a lot, and you learn to be thick-skinned, and you learn to be flexible and open, and have a conversation with people to help them understand more about you than what they're judging you as. And that was really important. So civil rights, human rights, women's rights, all lives matter. It doesn't matter what your gender or anything else is. The other thing that's really important to me is immigration. And I shared this story last night. I was born in Brownsville, Texas, the southernmost city in the U.S. My father was a Border Patrolman. My father retired as the chief of Border Patrol in Yuma. So I know the area well, right? When he came up through the Border Patrol and through Immigration and Naturalization Service, they provided a service that was under the Justice Department. It really was there to help immigrants come into the country legally and become a citizen. When the Justice Department went away and Homeland Security took it, it became ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And now they want to separate children from parents. They want to deport military, our vets, right, without understanding that they have a right to be in this country. They fought for this country. And we don't need a damn wall. Right. I'm telling you, I lived in Chula Vista. Right? My dad was the assistant chief in San Ysidro, right? The largest port of entry. Right? So I understand this. People need help. The dreamers need help. I support that. I support sanctuary cities. Right? No one should be treated like a criminal. So we really need to focus on immigration. It's not going to happen overnight. But our state and our bordering states and the states that border Mexico, we need to have a voice. And we need to stand up. And we need to not let our current president be as harsh as he is being and saying he wants to lock us in. Because locking them out is locking us in. Right? So we should be fearful of that. What our agents need is improved technology. Right? They need more agents. We don't have enough people applying. Because who wants to work on the Rio Grande River? I mean, who wants to work in the middle of the desert and work graveyard for 10 years? Right? We need to give them more. The last thing I'll talk about is education. Because again, I said, I started with a company at 17, right out of high school, because my parents couldn't afford to send 3 kids to college. You know, my dad didn't go to college and he retired as a chief. And I thought he was pretty darn successful. We have to get our education under control. We have to get it straight. And educational needs in rural communities are not the same educational needs that are in Phoenix or in Tucson and in the bigger cities. They're very different. Our challenges are different. Transportation, the buildings, the technology, the books, the meals for these kids. Our educators and administrators are professionals, and they should be treated and paid as professionals. They have, bachelor degrees, master's degrees, doctorate degrees, and they're buying supplies for their students because that's what they want to do. That's their passion. We have stood behind the Red for Ed at every protest and rally that they had in Kingman. And they know us now. You know, we walked behind them on the line with my damn cowbell. You know, but they recognize it. We turned more Republicans to independent off that line because they are so angry and they want. And we're listening to them because, again, for all of you, what the needs are in our rural areas are not the same. And there is no one size fits all. We have to be cognizant of that, right? And really listen, bring our communities together and see where we can get synergies, right, to improve things and improve them quickly. So that's a little bit about me. I, too, will be around for the rest of the evening if you have any questions. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Do we have some good candidates over here in Mojave County? At this time, I'd like to introduce Kelly Fryer. Kelly is running for the office of Arizona. Should I?
No, it doesn't. Let's me. And
okay.
If we need to cut off our time, we're good.
Yeah. No problem. We're here. There's no problem. Okay, Delina DiSanto, who's running for U.S. Representative District 4.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think we know her from her visit last year. I don't have.
You did a beautiful job.
So
the first time I was here. So everybody knows. Hi, I'm Delina DiSanto. Hi. I'm running for U.S. Congress, and I want to take Paul Gosar out. Of office. So I've had a few people say, what? So I was a finance director for 10 years at a hospital. And I worked with insurance companies and also negotiated pricing when the HMOs, PPOs were out and we were trying to get reimbursement correction. And I worked in a rural hospital, several of them. And so it was tough. And negotiating is one of my favorite jobs to do because I get to get into the grind of things and fight for the pricing. So, and I'll get to Medicare in a minute. So I also am a registered nurse, and I have a construction business with my husband for over 30 years. So what I've seen in the healthcare side is women giving up their healthcare. I've seen women that had breast cancer, and they stopped all of their treatment because they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford the insurance. And then also they didn't want to put their families or their churches in any kind of debt. I had 3 women that I knew personally that gave up their cancer treatments and they passed away. And it was really hard on me. And it broke my heart to see what the families are also going through, not just them. So healthcare is really important to me because of what I've seen. And that's why I truly believe that we do need to have Medicare for all. Now, it's easy to do this. A lot of people say how, because everyone's going, well, what about the Affordable Care Act? Well, let me tell you, we can strengthen the Affordable Care Act if we have enough Democrats in office in November. So we can definitely do that, because we can work with the Medicaid subsidies on that. However, we do need to work on Medicare for all, because the first thing, we have to do it in stages. So the first thing would be to lower it down to 55, the age of 55. After that, we have to go after the legislation in regards to negotiating prices with pharmaceuticals, okay? Because right now, if you're going to pay $1,200 for an EpiPen, but Canada's paying $12 for an EpiPen, that's insane in this country, and we should not have it. So those are the kind of things that I want to work on when we get into legislation, when I get into Congress. The other thing too is when it comes to Medicare, a lot of people are afraid that they're going to, it's not going to happen. Well, there's two things that we can do with that, okay? So we can offer Medicare, once we get all these stages set in place, we can offer Medicare as a program and bring the costs down. Now, if the insurance companies want to have private insurance policies, like there's going to be some of the 1%ers, they're going to say, well, I want to have my own insurance policy, they can go ahead and do it. Right now, we have Medicare Advantage programs, and these programs are being administered by insurance companies. And so they're still probably going to have to help Medicare to some extent. But Medicare is a phenomenal program. I've seen it. And it is, their claims processing, the people that work in Medicare, they are dedicated to that, and they know what they're doing. When you hear about the Veterans Administration, about the claims that's processing that goes on, that they're not processing claims, it's because their program is poor. The funding for the Veterans Administration has been cut tremendously, and that's why the Veterans Administration is in dire need right now, and it's in the condition that it is. And this is, to me, I don't understand why the Republicans are trying to take this away, to increase pricing for beneficiaries, meaning they want to privatize Medicare, they want to privatize Social Security, and they want to privatize the Veterans Administration. And that cannot happen because beneficiaries are going to see a tremendous amount of increase in their deductibles and also in their premiums. So we can't allow that. So really, seriously, we have to get Democrats in office this November. It's a dire. The other thing I want to say, and I don't want to take up too much time because I crashed Kelly and Deedra's party already, so, is that my mom worked 3 jobs. She was a waitress, so she worked during the mornings, waitressing, she worked in the evenings for dinners, and then she also worked on the weekends. There were 7 of us, and my mom had to take care of us. So my grandmother moved in, my Irish, strong, immigrant grandmother. And she had us whipped into place, thank God. And so I also lived in a low-income and diverse neighborhood. So there was many cultures that I lived with. Okay, there were Korean, there was the black community, there were the Cubans, there were the Haitians, there were, and then there was the other Asian groups that came over from Vietnam and so forth. But we all grew up together, and we all learned that we have to work together. So I learned a lot about human rights, women's rights, and equality. And if we stepped out of line in my neighborhood, the grandmothers got together. And I tell you right now, we would be punished, talking about being punished in 4th grade. I was punished many, many times. But I learned a lot. They taught me that we had to sit down and discuss the issue at hand. They sat us down and said, what is the problem? And I think that's what we need to do today in Congress, is that we're not having the conversation. We're constantly fighting, and that has to stop. We have to. So like I said, I don't want to take up too much time, but I do believe in the human rights, and I think healthcare is a moral obligation to people, to the citizens of the United States, and that we need to make sure that that is a human right, that we're all protected by it. And also, I have my LGBTQ community, okay, and friends and family, and I want to protect them. And there is an Equality Act right now in Congress that has been tried to pass 3 times, and it's failed because of our favorite Republicans in office and Paul Gosar. Sorry, my mouth's getting dry. And so we need to make sure, and I will fight for that. I will make sure that that's going to pass when we get in. Because it affects there's 28 states. I didn't know this until I thought there was only a few. There's 28 states that are allowed to not have the LGBTQ group adopt, have public accommodations, have service providers, and healthcare providers are allowed not to be able to see them. That's insane to me. That is insane. And we need to make sure that the equality...
She's a recipient of the Martin Luther King Jr. Diversity Award in Tempe and the Martin Luther King Jr. Award for the Human Relations Commission in Phoenix, correct? And she is originally from Little Rock, Arkansas, where she was raised alongside with her 3 sisters by her single mom, who became a sheriff's deputy. She moved to Phoenix in 1998. After 9/11, she started and directed the Arizona chapter of the Council of American Islamic Relations, then the Muslim American Society's Freedom Foundation, and she served on a multitude of boards and with other organizations that were championing human rights and American values. She attended Summit Law School, graduated in 2012, and has subsequently practiced immigration and estate planning law before she decided to return to community advocacy in 2016. Deedra.
Hello. I am Deedra, and I am running for U.S. Senate, and I have to go all over the state and tell people if you live in Arizona, you live in my district. Like you said, I am an attorney, and I practiced immigration and estate planning, so I got them coming and going. Before that, I was in civil rights and social justice, where I traveled all over the state of Arizona working with marginalized communities on civil rights issues and on discrimination. I am originally from Arkansas. That's where the accent comes from. And I was raised by a single parent, and I was the youngest of 4 girls. My mother she was one of the first law enforcement officers in Arkansas in the 70s. She actually divorced my dad and sued him for child support and received the documentation that she was supposed to get child support, but they didn't have child support enforcement in the 70s. Mm-hmm. They basically felt that if she was a good wife, she wouldn't need to steal money from her husband. So she couldn't get the sheriff's department to serve him. So she joined law enforcement, she became a deputy sheriff, and she did indeed serve him. She did not get paid, however, because they didn't have any child support enforcement. So she advocated with other parents for Arkansas to create a child support enforcement agency, and they did. So a lot of people did get paid. She still didn't, but that's a whole other story about, hiding money. But she really showed me leadership in that. She went on to become a federal marshal and then a federal investigator, and she worked the Timothy McVeigh case. So even when I lived in Arkansas, I knew where Kingman was. Because so did Timothy McVeigh. But she had to go to prison when he was waiting for trial, and she had to interview him, and she would come home, and that's the conversations we would have at dinner about, the conversations she had with him. And she had to travel all over Arkansas and visit with different white supremacist groups. And that was actually the first time I ever heard the term white supremacist, because before that it was KKK. So, there was already rebranding going on. And we had these conversations at the dinner table about who these people were, what they thought, but more importantly, that they were a fringe group. That is important. They were a fringe group. And in 2016, we started seeing that they weren't fringe anymore. They started being anointed. Mm-hmm. And their ideas became just as valuable and respected within the world of ideas, the marketplace of ideas, as all the other ideas. It was suddenly an opinion. That was new. I played sports growing up. I played softball and volleyball. When I was 14, I was wanting to play softball, but my mom told me no. She wouldn't let me play softball. She wouldn't give me the $25 actually to play softball. And it wasn't just because $25 was a lot of money. It was also because we didn't have health care. I'm 46, I think. I was born in 71, so I think it's 46. But we still don't have health care. It's still the same problem. My mom lived in daily fear that one of her children would be hurt and that would wipe her out financially. That she could not allow her child to play sports because she might get hurt, and that could make us homeless. We have not improved in this area. And my mom, even in law enforcement, worked 2 or 3 jobs to get by. We haven't improved in that either. And a lot of people, in a way, I would say more people now are in this situation than when I was younger. But I decided to get a job so I could get my $25. So I got a job at a gas station. It was $1.50 an hour. That was not minimum wage. Minimum wage was $3.25. But I needed a job to get $25 to play softball. So I took that job. And it was across the street from my school, but it was an hour's walk from my house. So I left at 5 a.m. and walked to get to work at 6 a.m. to open up the gas station by myself at 14, work until 8, walk across the street to school, get off at 3:30, walk back across the street, work until 8 p.m., and then walk home until 9. Because my mom had 3 jobs. She couldn't come get me. This taught me a valuable lesson about, working for what I wanted. And I will tell you that I think that maybe we as our generation wanted so much better for our kids. We didn't want them to suffer like we did. And so they actually didn't have to go through these problem-solving processes. And that's kind of a problem. We kind of self-created that. But at any rate, I learned that lesson. And I continued to do that the whole time. When I was 16, I had saved enough money, $1.50 an hour, to actually get a job that did pay minimum wage in the city. And then I got $3.25. Minimum wage hasn't increased that much. Not on the federal level. One of the things that you'll find on my website, and I do have the most detailed website of anybody running for U.S. Senate, is the living wage. This is important. And when I travel around Arizona, it's very interesting that the feedback I get on that isn't that people are against minimum wage or living wage. They're for it. We just passed it. In 2016, we passed a living wage in Arizona. So people are for it. They just don't understand why I'm talking about it, because we already have it in Arizona. The state legislature, just this last session, tried to get rid of it. It's not safe. We have to change it on the federal level, because if it's on the federal level, the states can go higher, but they can't go lower. And minimum wage was never meant to be what you should pay people. It was meant to be, we as a society have decided that below this is slave labor, and we're not going to accept it as a society. And while everything else, the cost of everything has gone up, living wage hasn't. Although profits of many businesses have. And when we say that it's going to hurt small businesses, studies have, since we raised it, studies have shown that's not the case. But even the argument that it's going to hurt small businesses means that we're subsidizing business on the backs of workers. If you can't afford to be in business, you need to renegotiate how you're doing business. I do believe we need to support small businesses. Instead of giving corporate tax breaks to corporations, huge mega corporations that are putting it into automation and rebuying back their own stocks, we should be putting that into local small businesses, because they actually drive the economy, they actually create jobs, and they actually keep money in the local economy. That's how you grow. In '98, I kept working 2 or 3 jobs too. It was evidently the thing. I ended up going to college, and then in '98, I came to Arizona for vacation. My mom came out here for a conference, and I had some vacation time that I was going to lose if I didn't use it. So I came out to Arizona, where I didn't know anything except it was really warm here, and I fell in love with it. Absolutely loved it. Even though it was 40 degrees, and it rained 4 out of 5 days while I was here. That was not cool. But everybody said, this was so unusual. It's usually 100. I'm like, oh my God, I could totally do 100. I'm coming back. So I went back to Arkansas. I gave a 3-month notice to my employer, picked a date. On that date, loaded my car, whatever didn't fit my car didn't get to come, and drove across country where I did not know one person, didn't have a place to live, and didn't have a job. And figured it out in a couple of days. Got here on a Wednesday, figured it out by Friday, went to Tijuana on Saturday, because I'd never been there either. And then I just fell into civil rights and social activism. I did not know that that was my calling and my passion. I was, if you'd known me when I was younger, I was like shy. I had zero self-confidence, straight A student. But, imagining that I would get up and talk in front of people and give classes on how we could work together. Yeah, 20 years ago, people would have never believed, I would never believe that. But I just fell into this thing and found how beautiful it was, how much we can work together. And today actually is a very good example of that. All of these female candidates are like, oh, they need time to speak? Get up there and speak. Because that's what women do. We spend a lot of time tearing each other down. I think it's, survival of the fittest, try to get the right guy, and it's socially ingrained. But, we can evolve, and we are evolving. Women who've never run for office, never thought to run for office, and statistically, women have to be asked 10 times to run for office before they ever will. Men just say, you want the new car, and they're like, yeah, I'll take it home today. I can't afford it, but it doesn't matter. You want to be CEO? Not a problem. I just finished high school, but I could do this. Women are stepping up because it's time. We've got to not only solve problems, we got to protect our community. And we think in community. We think in win-win. And that's why it's so important for women to be empowered. I'm not trying to get rid of men. Just saying, maybe join, let us join you. And maybe work together. Because we can do so much more if we think of us as a community. Because in the end, we are. We are a community. We're small communities, we're larger communities, we're larger states, which is a community. We're a whole country, which is a community. And in fact, we're part of a whole world. That's a community. We have neighbors all over the place. Whatever kind of borders you have. And we've got to work on that. The biggest things that I talk about let me tell you first, when I started to run, I went to law school because I had an altercation with our PIO about a civil rights issue in a jail. And I'm not going to use time to tell the story, although it's a really good story. You can check it out on YouTube, because we're also on YouTube. We got the hottest social media. We're on every single platform, including YouTube. The story's there. It's a really good story. But I went to law school and practiced immigration and estate planning. And in 2016, I became extremely upset because, number one, I was part of the whole movement of empty town hall seats. They weren't having town halls. They weren't meeting with us. We had no way to hold them accountable. We didn't have a way to talk to them. And they weren't explaining to us their votes. And that is an expectation that we should have. That if you're not going to vote in a way on an issue that we understand, you have a job as a public servant to explain that to us. Because we pay you. And the whole idea that our accountability is that we re-elect you, it is harder to get rid of an incumbent. So we have to have a higher standard than just people who are paying attention might vote you out next time. You have a responsibility as a public servant. This is not an escalation of your career. You're a public servant. So I was part of this movement, and then I also saw that so many people who were running for office across the board were disparaging different community groups, literally throwing community groups under the bus for political gain, no other reason. It wasn't because it helped the country in any way. It wasn't because it helped any state, any local community. Didn't help. But it did make people feel marginalized, fearful, unwelcome. And I turned to my husband and I said, it doesn't really matter who wins this election, the presidential election, because it wasn't just happening in the presidential election. It was filtering down in the other elections. Other politicians across the country were repeating this rhetoric because they saw that it was working. So it doesn't matter who wins this election. I've got to get out there and do something again. I've got to participate in having these conversations about what's important again, and how we're a community, and how we can work together, and how we have more in common than we have different. And my husband said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't have a clue, but I know it's going to be big. And so I, went around trying to decide what to do, decided, running for elected office. I've actually been asked many times as a woman that I should do that, and always said, no, it's not my bag. My job is to hold politicians accountable, and I'm really good at my job. And then I thought, actually, I tell marginalized communities, minority communities all the time, that there's only so much you can do from the outside for any institution. At some point, you have to get inside and change the culture. And I thought, maybe I need to take my own advice. So looking around at all the offices, this one was the most I was qualified for. I knew the issues, I could play on this level, and I was willing to put in the work. And what was the work? To recognize that this is the state of Arizona, not the state of Maricopa. So when I announced in April, I immediately got on the road. As of now, I've put over 35,000 miles on my car. I have been to 14 out of 15 counties before January of this year. I made it a personal goal that I would have a signature in personally gathered from me from every single county in this state. And I'm going to come up short. I'm missing a personal signature from Greenlee. So if you got anybody that can sign in the next 3 days or the next 5 days, because I'm turning in all of my signatures on Wednesday. But that's what needs to happen. First of all, it's just getting out, letting people have the opportunity to be involved. Second, it was talking about the real issues. Number one, healthcare for all. Every single industrialized country in the world has figured it out. You cannot tell me that suddenly the United States is the one that just doesn't have a clue.
Right.
Every country. It doesn't have to look like every other country, but we can do it. Right now, we're becoming a GoFundMe healthcare. And do you know GoFundMe teaches you how to tell your story better so strangers will donate to you? Do you know what that's called? Hunger Games.
Yes.
The envy of every country in the world. Actually, we used to have the healthcare system that everybody in the world came to. Now everybody's getting to other countries to get the healthcare. They'll go to India because it's cheaper and better. What are we thinking about how we're investing? And education, infrastructure issue. We got to where we are today because we invested in education. Our ancestors, my grandparents, gave up a lot so that we could get to where we are, making sure that every single person in this country got educated. They gave up a lot. My grandfather used to tell me, get that education, learn those pewters. And I cannot tell you how many times I heard how important education was because he walked uphill in the snow both ways. This is how important it was. And if we continue to deliberately defund our education and privatize it, we are making our children commodities and we will be a failed state. And any teachers can tell you, look at any history book, it'll tell you every single state that's ever failed because they didn't educate their population. And every state who has excelled because they did educate their society. These are important issues. Number 3, net neutrality. I know that so many people didn't know what this was. I've been talking about it since May of last year. This is a freedom issue. If you want to be free, then we have got to have equal access to internet. And all data on the internet has got to be treated equally. Corporations, relationships with corporations cannot control what our internet looks like. That's not free. And number 4 is separation of religion and state. I have zero problem with religion. Would you believe I'm religious? I don't want my government to be in the business of God. Or not. Just, stay out of the realm. Because no one has religious liberty unless everyone has religious liberty, including people who don't want religion. And every single attack on women's sexual freedom, and that's what all the attacks are. You can put it under abortion. You can put it under birth control. You can put it on whatever you want. This is about women's ability to decide what their sexual decisions will be without anybody telling me. I am 46 years old. I don't need my husband. I don't need my dad. I don't need my son to tell me what to do with my body. And I definitely don't need my government. Women's sexual freedom and the LGBT community attacks are all the result of people trying to take their interpretation of religion and force it onto us using their power and our laws. If there is a wall that needs to be built, that's the one. And now I want to talk about my real passion. My real passion is that we're going to make a change in Arizona. We're purple. I can already tell you we're purple. I've been traveling the state like a crazy person for over 12 months now. We're purple. Red for Ed was one of the biggest movements. It turned more people off of red more than anything. Your local community, you have 7 private schools. 4 of them are religious. They serve 658 kids. I'm sorry, Mojave County, so I'm not even talking about your city. Mojave County, so they have 62 public and charter schools, and charter schools are not private schools, even though they might be privately owned, and we can talk about the issues around the accountability necessary for that. They are not private entities that go by private funds, and they don't get any benefit from the vouchers. And this is the biggest misunderstanding in Arizona. But you have 62 public and charter schools that serve over 23,000 kids. You have a different problem than the city. City, it's all about choice. We want choice. We want vouchers so we can have choice. You don't have a choice. You have 7 private schools that can get vouchers, and 4 of them are religiously based. Right. You are a community. You have 62 public schools that you want to make sure they not only survive, but they thrive, because that's your community. People in this community went to these schools. They remember these schools. They probably know half the teachers that are still there or retired. Their kids, their family go to these schools. That's the kind of conversations you have with your neighbors. Instead of talking about the big issues, we can talk about healthcare. Well, if we don't have healthcare, you know we're going to die. Everybody's there now. They'll talk about, well, I don't want you to raise my taxes. Okay, but you don't mind that we're already paying for healthcare for all, but it's going to profit instead of your health. Can we have that conversation? My husband has diabetes, pre-existing. He pays $650 a month for healthcare with a $6,000 deductible. We've never received any benefit from our insurance. And his medicine, which he's not on insulin, is $600 a month. He can get the same medicine in any country in the world, and he travels internationally for business, so he can. Any country in the world, same brand, same box mix, same manufacturer, $30 to $60. This is an American problem. This isn't. This is a waste. This is a failure to negotiate. This is a failure to be efficient, and this is a failure to care whether your neighbor dies. That's what this is. So just one more thing. There are 96 open seats. When I say open, there are 96 seats on the ballot on the federal and state level this year. If everybody gets their signatures in, we won't have any blank spaces. And if nothing else happens this year, that's unprecedented. We can pat ourselves on the back, and we can really be happy because we've never had that. And the more people we have running in these races and no blank spaces, which is a forfeit when the other side wins, and the more people we have out there talking, the more we can get done from the top to the bottom of the ballot. Thank you.
You know, I've worked in I'm a nurse also, and we lived overseas for many years. We got really good health care, and it was really inexpensive as well. It was a big shock to come home and have to deal with that. I'm on Medicare now, of course, which is actually wonderful. So, healthcare, Medicare for all. Oh my goodness, I don't understand why we're at this point. We should have advanced long ago to have healthcare for all of our citizens. It's such a shame. So we have one more candidate, and that would be Kelly Fryer. Kelly is running for the office of Arizona Governor. I want you all to know that I'm hesitating a lot because I don't have my readers with me, and I'm straining to read this. She was born in Hammond, Indiana. Her mother was a great influence on her life as she first worked as at a high school cafeteria after Kelly's father died. And then she started her own small business. With the help of her public high school teachers, she was able to go to college on a scholarship for a degree in international studies that focused on environmental and political science. She then worked as a community organizer, at a group home, as a high school teacher, even starting her own muffin business. Really? In 1989, she was ordained as an evangelical Lutheran Church of America minister. She was the founding partner and CEO of a national consulting firm in Chicago. And when she moved to Arizona, she was the executive director of Arizona List, which is a version, I believe, of Emily's List, right? That helps elect pro-choice women in public office. Kelly then became the CEO of the YMCA of Southern Arizona, where she has had great success in a huge expansion of services championing economic, racial, and social justice. As I was reading about Kelly, I found that probably the embodiment of who she is could be found in the fact that she is a lifelong Chicago Cubs fan. She loves a big challenge that might look hopeless for the attainment of justice and equality, and she takes great satisfaction in providing that it is not. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. I really want to say a special thanks to those of you who were here on Wednesday. How many of you were here on Wednesday night? Almost everybody. And I would have loved to have been with you. And I'm sure that these amazing candidates would have loved to have been able to speak on Wednesday night as well. Thank you so much for coming back. It's Friday night. It's 100 degrees outside. There's an exciting graduation happening right now. Well, you probably would rather be here. I've been through a few of those. You know, I'm not going to actually make this very long because you have just heard from some remarkable women about what the issues are that are facing our communities and our state and our country. And I feel, I have to tell you, as I was sitting listening and clapping and whooping and hollering back there, I was thinking about the day the first Women's March in January of 2017. And I can remember standing on the platform at the podium, at the microphone, at the Women's March in Tucson, and looking out at that sea of 10 or 15,000 people, mostly women, and a lot of people who support women. But seeing all those people out there clogging every street in downtown Tucson, I mean, nothing moved for like 6 hours. Not even the people. It wasn't a march. It was a stand-in. There were so many people, there was nowhere to go. And I remember looking out at all that sea of faces and thinking, holy, what can I say on video? Holy cow. Holy cow. I think we might be able to actually do something here. I mean, for a lot of people, that day was the first day they had gotten out of bed in 2 months. Right? Because the day after the election, I think a lot of people pulled the covers over their head and said, I'm done. This isn't the country I believe in. This isn't the country I love. This is, I can't even deal with this. But that day, it felt like something was happening. And we've seen here in Arizona, and really across the country, since that day, you've seen this trajectory. We had the Women's March. We have the moms demanding action and demanding gun safety laws, demanding that our kids be safe in their schools, that we be safe in our shopping centers and at concerts, moms demanding action. We've seen the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, and women saying, you know what, my body is mine, and you don't get to. We've seen the SOS movement, the Save Our Schools movement, which is mostly moms. I don't know how many of you have met Beth Lewis, who was one of the founders of the Save Our Schools movement. Beth and I talked on the internet, on social media, and email over the last year or so, but I didn't get a chance to meet her until like 2 weeks ago. And when I met her, I'm like fangirling. I was like, Beth Lewis. And, I'm like, can I give you a hug? And she said yes, and we hugged. And I said, you're like a folk hero. And she said to me, I'm just a mom. I'll tell you what, there's something happening in this state and in our country. And it is coming right to this moment, right to this day, right to this time. And it's showing up in candidates like these. It's showing up in women who are standing up and speaking out and saying, you know what? We don't need to take over because we're women and we like work together. But we'll be damned if we're not at this table. And we're not playing around. The stories that you all told, the personal stories that you told, like this is real life. This is not playing games. One of the things that tipped me over the edge to say I'm going to run to be the governor of Arizona, because that's the office in our state where I believe, first of all, that's my resume. I've spent 25 plus years in an executive leadership position. As a senior pastor, as a CEO, I'm actually the most qualified person in this race to be the governor of Arizona. But not only do I have the resume, I can't not do this anymore. And one of the things that happened that got me to that point is that one of our super volunteers at the YWCA, where our mission is ending racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Not the YMCA. That's another organization, the YWCA. We work with 50,000 people every year. Thousands of women. A lot of them immigrants, a lot of them women of color, a lot of them economically poor. And they come to us because we have programs to help them get jobs, to help them start small businesses, to help them take the steps that they need to take, that they want to take, that they are taking to get themselves out of poverty and on a new path. And we have this great program on Saturday morning that's especially for immigrants who speak Spanish. And one of our super volunteers who had shown up every single Saturday morning for about 3 years to help other immigrant women learn English and get jobs and get acclimated, she disappeared. She came here when she was about 7 with her family from Mexico. And she was just old enough, she missed the DACA. She missed qualifying for DACA. But she's been going through the process of becoming a permanent resident. And she took what she thought would be the last step. At the request of our government, she crossed the border. And she went to get her paperwork signed. And when she got there, she was told that her request was being denied and that she could reapply in 10 years. Her American husband and her 12-year-old American son were at home waiting for her to come home for dinner. This is not playing around. This election is not about politics. This isn't about whose turn it is to get into office. This is about life and death for people in our state. We're running because the people that we love and the communities that we care about are in danger. And we are standing up and saying, no, time's up. It's time for new leadership. It's time for a new vision. It's time for new voices. It's time for new faces. This is about reclaiming democracy. You guys are running. Jem, thank you so much for that chart showing all of the independents here that live in our community. But when you just look at the red and the blue, that's redistricting. That's been done on purpose. I spent this afternoon in Phoenix meeting with an attorney because even though I'm going to turn in more than 10,000 signatures at the end of this month, and I need 5,800 to get on the ballot, I know that I'm probably going to be challenged by one of the opponents in my race, by another Democrat. And it's going to cost me $50,000 to defend that challenge. Right? So if you aren't rich, or you don't have rich friends, how do you get to play? This is about standing up and saying, the rules are wrong, the system is broken, and we're not going to take it anymore.
Right.
I'm sorry that you guys weren't able to speak here on Wednesday nights, but we are going to blast this video everywhere. John, thank you so much for your leadership. I'm willing to stay around and answer any questions you have about my positions. I'll say this. I was the last one to announce that I was running for governor, and I'm the only candidate yet to have robust policy positions on my website, because I'm not playing it safe in this campaign. I'm not running to the middle. I haven't hired some expensive consultant from DC or Chicago or LA to tell me to run a safe campaign. I'm running a campaign that is about real issues, because this is about real life. Thank you so much.